Welcome to Constructive, a podcast about construction, technology, and whatever else comes up. Hope you enjoy.
I was thinking about your son. So I was kind of, I'm hanging around with stuff like this morning. Can you see that?
Dude, I'm getting all kinds of stuff like that just to he already loves trucks, but I'm gonna pound that in, you know.
This is like the only toy that I have that is like that is marginally valuable.
Yeah.
This was the 320C way back in the day, back in early 2000. And this is a prototype of the model. So it actually has steel tracks. And the ones that we sold in like the gift shops and stuff have plastic tracks. This one actually has steel tracks on it. So that is way cool, man. There are people that would kill me for that for that one right there.
You
So
could
anyway,
go you could go actually do some excavating with that thing.
you could.
Yeah. Um yeah, well, Ken, so thank you so much for coming on here. I've been looking forward to this one just because of your long background. I wonder, the first question that I wanted to get to is construction is kind of a hard industry. I've only been in it for 15 years now, but you've been around for a while. How do you survive a long career in the construction industry?
Yeah, you probably wow, what an awesome question. You better love it, right? I mean, you better just have like a love affair with building things. And because it's going to have incredible ups and downs. And a lot of them are really not in your control. The economy does things that, you just have to ride. And some of the hardest things that I've ever had to do in my life were executing plans to keep the business alive during those terrible times. And but then some of the most incredible times in my professional life was, coming out of those. You know, I had a leader once that told me that humans don't experience life if their emotions are flat. They only experience the swings. So it's like a roller coaster ride. And, you feel the down and then you really feel the up, and that's what this business is. So again, I mean, I'm making a, it's you got to just love this. And I don't know. You're gonna work, so you got to love it.
How do you love it? Because that's another thing that just waking up every day, sometimes I get focused on, oh, there's this fight going on. This contractor doesn't like this sub, and I just don't want to deal with the conflict today. For me, some of it is going back to just like, what are we doing here? We're building something beautiful. There's a light at the end of this tunnel. I think back to my days just enjoying building Legos. Like, how do I build this team? I even start to just have to say, like, let me embrace this conflict and see if I can build some community together. I don't know, be the one that uplifts everybody. How do you love it when you get up in the morning?
Well, I guess you can't love it every morning, right? I mean,
Yeah.
that's pretty obvious. And but I think that my wife tells me that I'm not wired like most people. Because I always think long term.
Mm.
Even when I need to be thinking, even when it would probably be to my advantage to think short term, I'm always thinking long term. And it drives her nuts. I mean, especially when we were first married and you're living paycheck to paycheck, and I'm thinking, what? She's like, we got to get through this week. But I think that my career's that way too. And I think being able to jump out of bed in the morning and go do this is about keeping your eye on the long term prize.
Yeah.
What are we doing, and why are we doing it, and who are we doing it with ultimately? Um, and the conflicts with subs, man. I am so pleased that we pay people who want to be general contractors because, whoa, what a life. I mean, seriously, I only did it once on a big family project. after I retired, we'd come back to that. We'd come back to it later. But man, I wanted to do it because I'd never done it before. I worked with a lot of, GCs and in my career and had never experienced what they experienced. So we bought this property in Florida that had been reclaimed by the jungle. Maybe I've told you the story, a little bit about the story. And it literally had been reclaimed by the jungle. There were trees growing in the house. But to have what we wanted for kind of our family retreat, we had to rebuild within those four walls to permit it and be as close to the water as we want to be and some things like that. So I got the experience of, scheduling the subs, working together, getting the material on site soon enough, but not too soon, and all those kinds of things that you're battling on larger scale projects. But it was a really good lesson for me and a reminder of how pleased I am there are people that love that work and love to get paid to do it. Because man, what a pain. What a
Yeah,
serious pain.
it's
So
true.
I remember getting up one morning, by the way, and realizing that I had to fire one of my subs.
Mm,
And, um, so then you're thinking, what is the cascade effect for the project? I have to fire this sub. I have no choice. They have taken away my options. I have to fire this sub. And then you manage the downstream effect of that. And,
and usually in that case too, a lot of times they're trying to get fired because 'cause they're
oh,
pissed, and they're just like, "I'll just slack and see if he fires me, cause or whatever." But yeah, I totally sympathize with that. Let's go back in time a little bit. Let's talk about what initially got you interested in construction. Was it like when you were a toddler or
probably a little bit after toddler phase, kindergarten.
Yeah.
You know, way after that, I grew up, in a little farm community, and, across the street from my house was, one of my best friends who's a year younger than me, but his grandfather, Roy Fritsch, owned one of the significant earth moving and demolition contractors later on, in that part of Illinois where I grew up, middle part of Illinois. And, and also at that time was when they were building the interstate highway system through my hometown. So, talk about feeling old. This was 1966, 67. Um, God, did I just say that? Did I actually let people know how old I am on the constructive podcast? I think I did,
You
didn't
don't
I?
look that old.
But you can hang with me forever and keep saying things like that. And so I there was this big hill that we used to drive down, with my dad, and I remember my mom getting mad at him because you drive too fast down this hill. It was this valley with with a little narrow bridge at the bottom, and dad would, I'm swear, just hit that bridge as fast as he could hit it because he wanted to scare mom. And they used that valley as the bypass around the big town that I lived near. But it was close enough for me to ride my bike over there and watch these machines, sculpt that material. And they were running 631s with a big push block on the back, and they were pushing them with D8s. And I just thought that was the coolest thing, here I am on my, people of a certain vintage will know what I'm talking about here. I was on my Schwinn, um, gold metal flake Stingray, which is the banana seat, high handlebars thing.
Yeah.
And
I can picture it.
I remember sitting on, and I had and I had like a canteen with me, and I was just sitting there watching dirt move, trying not to get in trouble, but not doing a very good job of it. Because I was that little kid hanging around the job site that shouldn't have been there. But that's where I fell in love with it. So I spent my whole career working with machines, designing equipment, and the family lore is that I came home from my second grade class one day and announced to my mom I was going to go be an engineer and design machines for Caterpillar, which is what I did. Um, she insisted, she's gone now, but she insisted that I use the words engineer and design at 7 years old, which is come on, not possible, right? But that's what she said. And then I got to live that dream. I got to spend 33 years designing taking care of cat machines and working with cat dealers and customers who are the people that brought me into this in the first place, the guys that run this stuff. Um, got to live internationally while I did it. So we're fond as a family of saying that our children went to elementary school in Japan, middle school in Belgium, and high school in Chicago. And so it was very cool. I'd do it all over again. I'd do it all
That's
over again in a
awesome.
heartbeat.
One of the things I like about Caterpillar and just big dirt moving machinery in general is that ability to manipulate our physical world is something that construction is unique in. There's other industries that create products and stuff, but I think back to some of the coolest things on the planet to me that are human made are really old, like the pyramids, or you look at some of the buildings we've built, or to me, like moving dirt is one of the impressive ones, because just picturing what you were talking about, I had many times as a kid where we'd be driving by and I'd see tractors doing stuff. And if you drive by that same project for a month, you watch like the topography change, and you're just like, we can do that, like, and it's fascinating to me. When you're designing these machines, like, you mentioned something in our initial conversation about where you're at now, and I don't want to fast forward there yet, but when you're designing these machines, are you thinking about the people or the machine's ability or both? Because I feel like there's an interesting, we have to have humans in these machines right now. I know you're kind of working on changing that, but, or at least helping the humans make it a lot easier for humans. But how do you design heavy equipment for the human?
Wow, what a good question. I think it you have to design it with a human in mind. There's just, I mean, obviously, I mean, maybe not obviously. I mean, you can get really focused in on what the machine does and how it does it, and if you're not careful, forget how it's operated, and really importantly, how it's cared for. How is it serviced? In fact,
Hmm.
I'll tell you, we could, like, look, Seth, you're the storyteller, so I'm going to tell you a story. I
Please.
had a so early on in my engineering career, we did this thing called vehicle operations training at Caterpillar, where they took engineers out, and I had experience running equipment, but most of the engineers didn't. And we'd spend some weeks out there with really solid professional trainer operators, putting us through the paces and helping us embarrass ourselves for their pleasure. And one of them, it was a scraper that I was running. So I got to run. It was a 631. In fact, it was a 631B that I got to run in this day, and the hydraulic fill spout was underneath the gooseneck of the scraper, and you couldn't get a nozzle under the gooseneck and into that opening. And the operator told me, he said, "You're gonna fill it this way," and he gave me the Dixie cup. You can't make this up. He gives me a Dixie cup, and he says, "I want you to top off the hydraulic tank with this Dixie cup." And so I'm out there. I mean, and he comes out like a half an hour later, and I'm still bailing. I'm gonna do whatever he wants me to do, right? And he said, "I never want you to forget that." And here I am 40 years later telling the story. So it always stuck with me that when we were just laying out these systems, that somebody's going to have to work on this.
Mm.
How are you going to get a wrench in there? How are you going to get this filter out? How are you going to fill it? So not only, you've got an operator you've got to pay attention to, right? The ergonomics of running the machine, visuals, sight lines, sound, all those things come into play, but you just can't forget that somebody's got to take care of this thing. And I used to tell my product development teams that, look, you need to make really good decisions right now, because when you retire, those machines are still going to be running,
Mm.
and you're gonna be driving by the road, and they're still gonna be running. 25 years from now, they better be running. That's your job, that they're still running. And so you've gotta set up the machine for that. And, there are issues of rebuild and reuse, and, man, it's an interest I loved it. I mean, obviously, I loved it. I think as a mechanical engineer, I've trained as a mechanical engineer. I have master's in mechanical, and um, I thought these are the toughest problems in the world to solve. The interactions between the machine and the material we're trying to sculpt. Wow. Go solve that problem,
Yeah.
you know? But I boil it down fairly simply from a machine standpoint. I mean, there are only 4 or 5 really variables that I wanna deal with. Number 1 is safety. The most important thing is that whatever you're building and putting on a job site has to be safe for the operator, the service technicians, the spectators, the people that are working in the hole around the machine, all that really got it, number 1. Then the second one is, this sports that it's a sport. I'll use a sport important ability is availability. It it's gotta be reliable, man. If I go no, I don't care how good the machine is, if I go out and turn the disconnect switch and nothing happens, what good is it? So it has to be reliable, and then for a machine like an excavator, which is the love of my life, right? Other than my family, there's nothing I'd rather hang around with than a hydraulic excavator. If it's down, how many other machines on the site are down?
All of them,
Trucks,
right?
people, holy mackerel, what a mess, right? It's gotta stay up. Then the next variable is there's a huge performance aspect. Had a customer in China, of all places, tell me, "Look, Ken, if I didn't need a big excavator, I'd buy a small excavator." And I'm like, "Yeah, duh." Yeah, and because, his definition of performance might be different than, somebody in Denmark, but, there are aspects of lifting and how much dirt do you move and, how do you use it? That's gonna affect your definition of what performance is. And then the next level is I gotta make money. I mean, the price of dirt hasn't moved arguably years. I would argue with you that not only has the price of moving a yard of dirt not kept up with inflation, it's gone the other way. I don't How do you make money? You make money by being really super efficient if you're
Hmm.
excavating. You better ma If you're not super efficient, thinking about efficiency, I don't know how you do it. Because tell me how your customers are gonna respond when you tell them you need to take a 10-15% price increase for the next job you're gonna do. Um, so it's this owning and operating costs. That's the fourth element. I mean, the cost has to be as low as it can possibly be, to move a yard of dirt. And then the last one is, if you can take care of all those others, if you can take care of safety, reliability, performance, owning and operating cost, look, we all breathe the same air and drink the same water. It's gotta be, it can't be a polluter, especially today. We've become far more sensitive, and rightly so, to this than we were when I started. I remember actually designing a machine that didn't belch black smoke. The first one that went out there, operators didn't like it because the smoke in their minds was reinforcing that they were doing some work.
Mhm.
The same thing happened when we introduced really quiet machines. I
Mm.
can't hear it. I can hear the hydraulics over the engine. What's wrong with this thing?
Mm.
So, we've become far more, and as I said, rightly so, sensitive to these environmental aspects. But again, you got to take care of the first four,
Yeah.
or I can't even play. I can't even work and be environmentally conscious about it.
I've been thinking about that. I know as an industry, we have to keep saying safety first, and it's a good phrase. I heard Mike Rowe, the Dirty Jobs guy, talking about safety first, and he said it's really safety third. He said he did this whole series about how we don't really put safety first because you got to make money.
Yeah,
People, especially in the construction industry, they're out there risking their lives. If you think it's
they are.
safety first, you're kidding yourself.
No, I know.
There are people who die, stuff like that. But he was also making this point like safety vests, hard hats, safety supervisors, all these people that are telling the workers, we're watching you, OSHA's watching you, we're going to make sure you don't drop your tools or hang them by the cord, or they then start to let go of some of those. They don't take their own risk into their hands. They think, oh, I've got this safety vest, I've got this hat. I can walk around a little bit easier because I'm protected. And so his point was like, we need to like remind people your life is in danger and you're the one who has to protect it.
I think that frankly, I think he's spot on. He's absolutely right. I mean, and if I listed those 5 variables in the order that I think, people don't do what they say. Their actions are different than their words, right? Everybody says safety first. But let's face it, reliability, performance, cost, those come first. And it's kind of the argument I made about environment. If I don't have those things, I can't survive anyway. So they usually behave with those 3 first. I hate to say that, but again, it's if people do things differently than they say they're gonna do. However, we've also recognized that not taking care of the safety of employees has a massive impact on cost, and it should, right? We ought to really be slapped around if we're not taking care of them. And so it's kinda worked its way above that owning and operating cost, that third element, because it is part of owning and operating costs, which is what has elevated it to that 3rd place.
Mm,
Kinda sad.
yeah.
No, more than kinda sad. Really disappointing that that's the way we humans are, but
Yeah,
that's the
safety
way we
has to
are.
affect the bottom line in order for us to care about it.
Yeah.
And that is sad. I agree
It's
with you.
disappointing, but
Yeah.
mm, it's disappointing, but let's be real. Let's have some real talk about it. That's the way it really is.
Mm.
And, yeah,
Can we
disappointing.
get into so you
Get
spent a long
into
time at Caterpillar.
anything you wanna we're gonna get into I can tell,
Yeah.
Steph. We're gonna get into whatever you wanna get
Yeah, I
into, man.
I'm already just reeling here. I've got a million things in my mind, but you spent a lot of time at Caterpillar. Um, did you fall deeper in love with the people who are operating these machines or the machines themselves? And what kind of culture is at Caterpillar? Because it's a company I love. I've always owned stock in Caterpillar since I started buying stock, and I just
Mhm.
think they're awesome. Talk about your time at Caterpillar, whatever you want to say.
Shoo, I really think I really it's been, let's see, the end of December will be my the ninth anniversary of when I retired from Caterpillar. It's just incredible to me. I'm entering 10 years of having stepped away. Um, so I'm really nostalgic about it. I mean, it's not perfect, right? I mean, no big company is perfect.
Hmm.
Um, so let's just give you the kind of the path. I think I had 3 careers within Caterpillar, right? My first one was very technical. I was a structures designer, stuff breaks, it can fix it. So I was a problem solver, and that's how I was used. Having fixed this, having fixed that. And then they moved me to Japan in 1990 that was part of the Sheen Caterpillar Mitsubishi excavator joint venture, and my job was to elevate the technical design capabilities of that team. They were really good. They were really good anyway, and I know they're trying to make them presumptuous enough to think I can make them better. And then after that, I had more of a marketing assignment. They moved me to Europe after that, and I spent 180 business days a year with customers for the first 2 years and fell in love with them all over again.
Mm.
So you asked me, do you feel stronger about it then? You know, in the early part in my career, a lot of young men, maybe I'm not very mature today, but I certainly wasn't very mature then and didn't really know what I wanted to be when I grow up and arguably don't know what I want to be when I grow up today. Uh, but when I got back out into the field and remembered why I fell in love with this in the first place, talking to operators, working with contractors, watching the dirt move, you said it. I fell in love with it all over again. I went back to Japan on a visit, and Caterpillar people will know who I'm talking about. The late great Dave Moore, who was one of the people instrumental in my career for moving me from a purely technical to a more business-oriented type of roles in the future. Uh, but I went back and I don't even know what we were talking about, Seth. He said, "You've been talking to customers again, haven't you?" And I said, "Yeah, how did you know?" He said, "'Cause you've got this look, you've got this tone, this attitude. It's not about what you know, it's about how strong you're feeling about what you know." And I thought, "You know what? That's it, that's it." That just reminded me that, he's right. I just, you know, I just loved it, fell in love with it all over again. So that was my second career was kind of that marketing types of roles but mostly what I was doing was either elevating salespeople and dealers, on the technical aspects of what excavators their customers needed and those sorts of things. But I was also spending a lot of time doing what we called sitting on a rock. I'd take my laptop or the scale truck and I'd just go sit and watch.
Mm,
And I remember when I was a little kid, I was comfortable on a job site when I shouldn't have been. Kind of goes to our safety conversation earlier. And when you get back out on a job site, you're really uncomfortable.
mm,
And you know what? You ought to be. But I remember spending so much time on job sites again that I was, uh, it's hard to put it into words, comfortable, but still cautious.
mm,
I knew the flow. I got to know the flow of excavation, really good excavation operations, and knew what to expect and wasn't in the way. And, you always wonder, am I in the right spot? I got to make somebody mad. But all that changed, over time, but you still had a good, you had to be really careful about it. Then to your question about the Caterpillar culture began my third career. My mother-in-law became, um, very ill when we were still assigned in Europe, and, um, called my boss, described the situation, and I was home in a month.
mm,
I was back in the US with a new assignment in a month. My wife couldn't even follow that fast. So my wife and children followed after. But there's this family orientation, and you hear that, companies are not families. Well, I don't know if I agree with that.
mm,
Um, and my wife says Caterpillar's a cult, but but because we're just so devoted to what we do,
mm,
it just, it does, pass the litmus test of being a cult in some ways because we're just so nuts fanatical about what we're doing. But the family aspect of it, you need to get home and we're going to get you home now. And that began my third career, which was really more in the leadership executive type roles. I was in the Peoria area for 5 house payments, and an opportunity to lead the C-Series excavator development program opened up. And my new boss, Max Martin, who just gotten to know me, just said, "Look, there's no other person in the company to run that. It's gotta be him. We gotta move him." And so literally 5 house payments later, she had just gotten there. The kids had just gotten into school basically, and here we go again. And so they moved me to the Chicago area to the Aurora plant, Montgomery, Illinois plant, and that was kind of the beginning of things where I ran the C-Series excavator program as the product. So the program manager. So I was the guy that managed the budget and, and got the subs to work together, the internal subs, and we had everything from, that role managed the future of the pop product line.
mm,
Was basically what that was for. And then, and then after that, I got to go to California. So they moved me I had an office in, Santa Ana, California. And, that was what we called the Los Angeles district manager role, which was in Orange County. But who's counting if you're not from California? You don't really know where those places are. But that was a dealer development kind of a role where I worked with cat dealers every day. Fantastic, just fantastic. I mean, Man, what a learning experience. You think Caterpillar's complicated, cat dealers have more people and capital invested in the business than the parent company does. They're all independently owned, and many of them family businesses. And man, the relationships they have with customers, it's just incredible. Are they
That makes me
perfect?
think about, like, a bigger picture business thing about how Caterpillar builds that, because 'cause I'm always about building trusted partners, like,
Yeah,
you can't
yeah,
just operate as a company, you need trusted partners that aren't part of you.
yeah.
How did Caterpillar build those relationships with the dealers to make it so powerful? Do you know?
I think well, there's an agreement. There's a sales and service agreement that really is instrumental in defining the relationship. It's really a service territory that they set up. And they're really clear about what the rules are. Hey, and I think um the best way to describe it was if the dealer does the right thing, Caterpillar will back them up. And I don't wanna get it doesn't need to be any more complicated than that. I mean, if and it doesn't always work perfectly, right? I'm not saying there aren't disputes, but as a district manager, my role was, look, if you have a customer with a problem and you're gonna need factory support to fix it, fix it. Tell me later. I will help you. And, if when the relationship works like that, then you develop a lot of trust.
Mm.
Is it perfect? Heck no. It's always requires work. But I do think that the reason that it's so strong is because these aren't factory stores. These aren't Caterpillar-owned dealers. These are, independently owned. Some of them are corporate, some of them are publicly traded, but many of them are family businesses. And so you have this global capability as a company, but you have local support, relationships. Um, you know, why is a bucket different in Norway than it is in Illinois? Well, because the jobs are a lot different. And you need somebody on the ground all the time. The jobs are different, the materials are different, on and on. You need somebody on the ground that really, really understands that. So I think, Seth, this combination of global massive presence and capability combined with independently owned local dealers, um, I'm oversimplifying it, of course, but I think that's the key. And then that relationship is if you fix it locally, I'll back you up. That type of relationship is what has made this work.
Yeah,
And
one thing I'm learning in the construction industry in general is just the one size fits all thing does not work in construction because every project's so unique, and it's just like you have to know if you're doing a project in Denver or China, wherever, you have to know that area, not
you do.
even more specifically, the site location. It could be a very local, small governance that you need to be familiar with. But I want to get into technology because that's kind of where we're headed in this conversation. So maybe start with like, how was Caterpillar? Where'd you get introduced to how tech can help in the heavy machinery industry?
Probably in Europe. That's where I saw the most of it. It's where and this is a long time, but I first started seeing hydromechanical tools in Europe more than I saw them in the US. And quick couplers and thumbs and variable booms and, all that type of, you know, not highly sophisticated technology really by today's standards, but those types of things were much more prevalent in Europe than they were in the US. A lot of those types of technologies began there. And so I think that was probably where I was first introduced to it. And then we started, it goes back to those 5 requirements. You know, there isn't a customer in the world asking for technology
Hmm.
that I've ever met. They're asking for one of those 5 things to be better,
Mhm.
right? And and so, the iron can go so far and the hydraulics can go so far. But then, can technology improve aspects of the business for customers. And I've always warned against this thing called Maslow's hammer. We're familiar in school with, we do a psychology course, and we know Maslow's hierarchy of needs. But the same psychologist created this, one of his other concepts is this thing called Maslow's hammer, where if you have a hammer, every problem that you face is going to look like a nail. And so it's super important and it's critical that people who have mastered a technology not be trying to shoehorn that technology into every application. You need to be,
Amen.
you need to start with what do these customers need to be more effective, whether it's safety or reliability, performance, owning an operating cost or environment. What do they need? They're not telling you that they need Dig Robotics, quite frankly. They're
Mhm.
not. They're telling us that they need to be more productive and they need to reduce their cost. That's what they're telling us. That's why we're doing what we're doing. So I think that started a long time ago, and I think for me, one of the first technologies that I thought was really, really cool was grade control
Mm.
for excavation.
Can you
Um,
explain?
so grade control is you put you program the desired geometry into a computer on the machine, and it senses where it's digging and will not allow the operator to go beyond that envelope that you've defined. Okay, because one of the big wastes in excavation is put back. I mean, I've dug too far. Damn it. I gotta come back and I've got to put that dirt back in, compact it. I've got to restore it. And so one of the big wastes in excavation is handling material twice. And so I thought one of the really cool technologies was just around, what can we do to save dirt contractors from having to move material twice?
Mm.
And grade control technologies, that sort of spectrum of GPS control of machines, or limiting of movement of machines, really does save a considerable amount of money. So I don't know. I don't know if I'm answering your question very well, but
It is. Does that
it
mean
all
though
goes
that
back to
Oh, go ahead.
customers. It all
Yeah.
goes back to customers. What do they need?
Does it mean and just going back to grade control, does it mean you have to have, like, a lot of topography data built in? Like, do you have to do a lot of surveying to get to where that grade control works?
So, I'm gonna butcher, somebody at Trimble's gonna go, "Oh my god, he doesn't understand this at all." But there are several companies that do this. Trimble is an excellent company. Topcon is another one. Like a Hexagon, probably the third major player, and there's some other ones too that do excellent work. But the first thing that they start on the ground with a scan, and a 3D model of the topography, and that's their first role. So many of them have their roots in surveying. So they start with building this 3D model, and they communicate that 3D model, which I think they communicate the 3D green field, right? What's its starting point? And then they input what I think of as a near net shape. So you want to get the excavation close with the excavators, dozers, loaders, those things, and they
Right.
provide that input to these machines, and then those machines, when you get close to that boundary, then grade control takes over and doesn't allow you to dig outside of that boundary. So you can avoid. Actually, you can avoid having this the guy with the stick in the hole and that kind of stuff. You can avoid all that stuff too. So not only is it a carryback cost that we're avoiding from a machine perspective, it's also a safety issue because you don't have the guy with the stick in the hole, and you can have that person doing something else rather than surveying, when the machine will do the surveying for you.
You wanna get into Dig Robotics and maybe just, like, how you ended up there and talk about that technology kinda transitioning you into where you're at now?
Yeah, well, my mentor says I failed at retirement. So just to, I ran cat. So just finish off the cat saga. I was fortunate enough to run Caterpillar's small excavator business worldwide. So the kind of 11 to 19 metric ton size machines. So I was a director of their building construction products division. Then they asked me to do the large excavators for as a director of excavation division. So I had the 30 to 100 metric ton size machines. And then in the end, the chairman asked me to be the first director of innovation. And then I retired at the end of 15. My mentor says I failed at retirement, but I think he's wrong. I get to do the things that I want to do. So I mentioned the family project that I did, but Dig is the first startup that I've ever had the title founder associated with me. This is the third startup I've worked with. I love the technology space. So worked with an additive manufacturing 3D printing company that was printing steel, that was printing metals, which was very, very cool. And then I worked with a company called Dig Robotics, which is replacing hydraulics with very powerful, fast, efficient linear actuators. Really cool technology as well. And then somehow got roped into this Dig Robotics thing as a founder. So my co-founders Noam Rodham and Dr. Oded Medina started a company back before the pandemic called Syracuse. The background you have right now is really appropriate for Syracuse because they developed what I think of as the Tesla autopilot for tower cranes. So you've got a load on the ground and you need to place it, and the operator would identify that load into this location, and then Syracuse software hardware would take over and put the load in the right place for the lowest cost. So, it's keeping all the interferences in mind and wind conditions and et cetera. And then they sold that business. And I always give Noam a hard time. He's not driving Bentley. He's too of an engineer to drive something expensive. Uh, they wanted to start another business, and they wanted to take this motion planning, motion control idea into another application, into a into, and so they decided to, after a year of looking what they wanted to do, they decided a place to do it is excavation, and an opportunity to do it is in excavation. And so, and I don't need to tell your audience how big excavation is, but it's a huge opportunity, right? There are 10 million machines worldwide, conservatively, that are pushing dirt around with a bucket or a blade. So there are a tremendous number of machines out there. And the owning and operating cost of these machines is in the billions of dollars annually. So there's a huge amount of opportunity here if we can make it better. And so what Dig is doing, and I think I would say it, and at the risk of geeking out too much, um, Dig is at the intersection of kinematics, which is motion control, a motion planning for a mechanism, and 3D scanning, 3D geometry, and machine learning, or AI AI is such a buzzword, but I think we try to keep our algorithms as simple and as basic as we can. But it's those three things that work together. And so from an engineering point of view, we can calculate based on the topography of the work site and the geometry of the bucket and the machine. We can calculate from an engineering kinematics point of view. We can calculate the ideal path that bucket should be on for every one of the thousands of strokes that are
Sure.
taken in an excavation. So there's an ideal depth, there's an ideal speed, there's an ideal bucket rotation angle. There's a time when you're done. You need to quit pushing dirt, get out of the cut, you're done. So those types of things, there is an optimal path. But in i- the real world isn't ideal. Shit happens. So we're using 3D scanning, stereoscopic cameras, and watching what's happening in the bucket at all times, or
Sure.
at the blade face at all times. So we can respond in milliseconds if the material isn't homogeneous, or if you hit a rock, or if you break a tooth. We can respond immediately and tell the operator what to do. And then the last part is this machine learning, where we're not telling the machine what the material is. It's learning what the material is. So the first scoop might not be all that effective, but the second one's going to be really good, and the third one's going to be better than that, and the fourth one's going to be even better. And it goes back to, we're not trying to automate this or take control away. And it probably goes back to my love of the people that are involved in this in the first place. Our goal is to make the operator better. That's what we're trying to do. And we can make novice operators really good, really fast. And we can give experienced operators insights that they didn't expect, because the visual feedback is, let's load this bucket as heavy as we can. Let's just get as much in this bucket as we can get in it. That's not often the most productive, most efficient, least damaging approach you can take. So we're providing those kinds of insights.
That's very
So
interesting.
that's what we're trying to do.
Yeah, there's like a
Um,
whole movement in our industry, lean construction, that's kind of based on that principle. It's not always add more capacity to get faster. Just like you don't put more cars on the freeway to make the freeway move faster. You take some cars away and then it moves faster. You need flow, and it just seems true on every level, whether it's how big of a bucket you pull up, or how many guys you have pouring concrete, and are they stepping on
it
each
is.
other's toes or not. But I love that.
It
Talk
is.
more about the
There's a great
motivation.
No, there's a great study that I'm gonna say it. It wasn't a Caterpillar study. It's a great study that Volvo Construction did.
Hmm.
I want to say 2013, 2014. They studied the performance of operators running excavators. And it was a pool of about 80, if I remember, if my memories serves, and I think it does, of 80 operators they were looking at, and they were studying the variation among those 80 in terms of volume or mass of material moved over time, so productivity, and also efficiency. How much fuel do you burn to move the material, per unit of material moved? And among experienced operators, their results were that there was a 300% variation. Think about that, 3x variation in excavator operators from a productivity point of view.
Yep.
Now, if you're a site manager and you're trying to stay on schedule, how much are you going to move today? There's which operators running today? What are they feeling good today? There's a 3x delta, and those are among the experienced operators.
Hmm.
If you throw the novices in there, it's a 7x delta.
Hmm.
Or you throw inexperienced, I should say, infrequent users in there, it's a 7x delta. It's 700%. So, and then if you look at efficiency, so I'm trying to manage my cost. Among the experienced operators, the efficiency, so the fuel burned per unit of material moved. So tons per gallon, or yards per gallon, however you choose to look at it in the U.S. We should probably change to meters and metric tons per liter for some other parts of the audience. But that delta is 1.5x, 150%. Among experienced operators. So you're going to be on target for cost to move this material or not? You have no idea. Think about it. The
Right.
variation is so wide, and in terms of productivity to stay on schedule, and then the variation is very wide from a cost standpoint to know whether you're going to be able to stay on cost or not. And if you
Yeah.
throw the inexperienced guys in on the cost level, it's a 3x delta.
So yeah, you're talking about, just making sure I understand, there's such a big swing between, you could either be bankrupt after this job or you could be rich.
Right. Right.
Hmm.
Chances favor bankrupt. The odds favor bankrupt in
Yeah.
a case like this. So what we're doing is, our focus is on showing operators how to narrow. So what I want to do And we're demonstrating that we're able to do this. It's early. I mean, we're not even a year and a half old yet. We're flying, but we're still very, very young. We're moving the productivity, everyone's productivity mean to the right. We're increasing everybody's productivity with a few exceptions. The very top operators are there all the time. And then we're also moving their efficiency numbers up as well, and we're squeezing down the standard deviations
Hmm.
so that their productivity is higher, the variation is lower, their efficiency is higher, so their fuel costs are lower
Mhm.
and more predictable. So that's what we're trying to do. And I'll give you an example. We're running on an old Liebherr R984, which is a 100 metric ton excavator in a quarry. And that machine uses about 50,000 gallons of diesel annually. And we're able to take 20% of that out and move more material with it. And those are the kinds of numbers that we're trying to, we're taking, we're going to be able to take to the bottom line, much better numbers. And without having to go, look, this is construction. I mean, there are so many variables. And the more variables there are, the more difficult it is to automate an application. In mining, it kind of started with hauling units. We know where that mine's going to be for 20 years. We know where the hauling units are going to be loaded. We know where they're going to dump. So that's a really good place to start automating, on the mine site. The loaders are coming later. They're coming. I mean, we know where they're going to be, but it's harder to automate them. There are far more humans involved on the loading side in mining. In construction, what do you think OSHA's going to say about running an articulated truck along a roadside without an operator in it? Probably not in my lifetime, Seth. Are they going to let us do that? Right? Come on. That's it, in California. Are you gonna see a D400 with no operator in it, running in the dirt lane next to the highway, next to the 5? Doubt it. Doubt it. So, what we're doing is, and it goes back to my love of operators. We can make operators a lot better. And I've had a lot of people say, "Well, do you think operators want the technology?" You know what? If you could show an operator, gosh, the vast majority of them, I don't know any of them that if you show them how to be better, they're not gonna wanna do it. I don't know any like that. I just don't. I know operators that take their boots off before they get in the cab because they don't want the cab dirty. I know more operators like that really care about what they're doing. I mean, I really do. That's my machine. I'm gonna go to that machine tomorrow. Don't mess with my machine. I know a couple of guys that polish their machines, that rub them down like it's a BMW or something. I know more like that. And maybe that's just the circles that I run in, but I know more operators that are proud of what they do and wanna
But it
get
goes back
better.
to what you were saying at the beginning because, like, if we're just trying to improve the lives of these operators, and you're talking too about making them feel better about, I'm doing this work and can feel a little more assured that at the end of the day, I'm going to go home with a paycheck that will feed my family, and I don't have to worry about going bankrupt as often. And things just
Right.
seem to
Right.
run smoother, and I'm not doing rework all the time, you know? If that's the case, we just gotta prove it to them, and then it will be like, "Bring it on," right?
Right. Right. Yeah, I've had a lot of people say, we're reticent or reluctant to take on new technology. Not if it serves our basic needs in construction, we're not.
100%.
Right? If come on. If you're just gonna bring a technology to me because you think it's cool and you don't understand what I do, get out of my office. I don't have time for this.
That's what I'm worried
Um,
about too, is there are a lot of tech companies out there that see an opportunity in construction and they're just pushing it because it's tech. Look, AI, have some AI. And we're all like, construction industry is slow to innovate, but some of that might be good. And I just think we should be picky about which tech we're using. And like you said at the beginning, it shouldn't be pick a tech. It should be, how do we improve those 5 things you were talking about? And if
that's
tech is
right, and it
involved,
may not
great.
yeah, and it may not be the tech at all, right?
Mm.
And in fact, if I have a really strong engineering team and I'm helping them understand what earth-moving excavation contractors need, they may come up with a totally different solution that's way off in left field from the technology that I think is cool, because they're understanding the business and what's going on out there. And that's really where it starts. I mean, um, the other part about this, Seth, is this is hard.
Mm.
This isn't, we're talking, autonomy isn't easy, right? But autonomy on the highway, which is hard, is a lot easier than what we're talking about. There are a lot fewer variables. And so part of the reason that I think that this industry is not regarded as, technology adopters is because it's so hard. Show me a technology that will improve, one of my 5 variables and I'll talk to you
Mm.
and I'll try it. I'll at least try it.
Man, I want to talk for
So,
3
anyway.
more hours, but I got actual work to do.
Do ya?
Let's do this again soon, Ken. I want people to reach out to you if they're interested in Dig Robotics. Go look up Ken Gray on LinkedIn. Anything else you want to tell people to check out?
Nah, you know what? You'll find me out there. We'll get this out there and we'll put a link to, what I do and what Dig Robotics does, and there'll be more from us coming. We have a couple of machines that we're gonna be a couple. We have some machines that are gonna be running in Oklahoma and Texas, and we have some other stuff going on in the middle part of the US, so you'll get a chance to see us actually run. And because that's the proof's in the pudding, right? I mean, I can talk about what we think we can do, but let's get it out. Look, come on, we're gonna be out in the dirt, and we're gonna show you what we can do out in the dirt. Then talk to me. And
Beautiful.
so anyway,
Thanks
that's what we're
again,
gonna do.
Ken. And again, I'm gonna have part 2 coming soon. So everybody stay tuned for when Ken is back.